everyone. Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. We're super excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm excited to have Jacob on with us. Jacob is one of our students from Canada, actually, which, we obviously work with a lot more students in the US, but every once in a while, we do work with students in Canada as well. And he has successfully recruited, just finished recruiting for his summer internship here in the States, actually, which I know a lot of Canadian students we talk to want to do. So um, definitely wanted to get him to come on here and just kind of talk about his journey a little bit. I think a lot of what we're going to dive into will hopefully be really insightful for those of you who maybe are Canadian but want to work in the States as well. Yeah, so that's kind of like pretty much what today's going to be. Jacob, first of all, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. If you could start things off by just kind of introducing yourself to our audience a little bit so they know kind of who you are, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Of course, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to come speak today. So for me, I'm a second year finance student at the University of Windsor. I'm taking a Bachelor of Commerce program there with a specialization in finance and a minor in economics and philosophy. And obviously, as you know, the University of Windsor is not a target school by any means. It doesn't compete with the likes of the other top schools like Ivy, Queens, U of T, UBC. So it's a difficult process, but that's kind of something that you learn through the Wall Street Mastermind program is just how you can overcome those different challenges. So I'm happy to go into any of those today.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, to be completely honest, obviously I've heard of, Ivy, Queens, even like all the target Canadian schools, right?
Yeah,
I had not heard of Windsor until you kind of joined the program. So,
yeah.
are you guys a pretty small school, like in terms of student population, or?
Yeah, we're like sub 5,000 probably, very small school. The business school, the class in the business school, I usually sit in the class with like 30 people. So it's very small school. Yeah, so
Oh, that was in across all 4 years, or in a single grade?
yeah, except for like the ones that like you have to combine with like other programs. So we'll take some stats classes that we're sitting in classes where there's other kids who are like biomed majors or math majors or something like that, and we'll sit in those classes too, and that's when it gets big. But other than that, business school is very small.
Gotcha. Do
Yeah.
you know, like, roughly how many people from your school break into banking each year?
So I was actually that's a good question. I was actually on the phone with an MD from Goldman the other day, and he comes from Windsor. He didn't go to the University of Windsor though, and he was asking me to cite some people who came from University of Windsor, and I cited a couple people who worked in private equity now, and all of them were older than him. So there's very little people. There's a couple people who have been successful in recruiting in Toronto. One that works in like the middle market M&A area, a couple others that work in like smaller boutique firms, but nothing in the States, and certainly nothing to the level of like Bolts Brackets or Elite Boutiques over there.
Wow. Okay. From what you're saying, though, it sounds like you can count the number of people on one or two hands, is what
Oh,
you're
for sure, one hand, yes.
saying. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is pretty freaking amazing, given what you just said. So I'm sure people are wondering, so like what was the offer that you got, I guess?
Yeah, so it would be with Piper Sandler and their industrial coverage, which is obviously a great firm, and I'm super excited about the learning opportunities there. They really prioritize like internship learning and being able to like get actual like very good experience starting right away on deal teams and being paired up with analysts and stuff like that. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to.
And is that in Chicago, or which office is that in?
That's in their Birmingham office in Birmingham, Michigan.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I figure industrial groups are usually somewhere up in that area. So,
Yeah. They have Chicago, they have Virginia, and Birmingham, I think, and then one in New York as well for their industrials groups. I'm pretty sure.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Um, what what did it feel like when you got the offer?
a relief. It felt like a lot of relief. I like when I got the call, I had pretty much no words. I didn't really know what to say other than like thank you super excited because I honestly like I went to the interview prep like crazy, but the back of my mind I was still thinking this is a long shot for sure. And I wasn't really fully expecting to get the offer because I knew the other kids that I would be competing with, and so the competition for investment banking is obviously very difficult, and it seems to get even more difficult every year. So it was definitely something that I was very thankful for to even get the opportunity to interview, but then get the offer was over the top.
For sure. Who were the first people that you told once you found
My
out?
my parents for sure. They know how much effort I've been putting into recruiting and like studying and practicing all that kind of stuff, and they've supported me in a like a multitude of ways for trying to break in. So being able to tell them was very nice.
That's amazing, man. That's awesome. Um, so let's let's go to the kind of the beginning, right? So,
Yep,
because I'm sure now people are wondering, like, okay, so how did this guy do it? Right? So, like, because you joined Wall Street Mastermind uh in November of,
yep,
of 2024, right? And we're
yep.
recording as of March of 2025, and so it's been a little bit less than 4 months. So prior to that, prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind, like what were some of the things that you were already doing on your own as far as like trying to set yourself up to break into banking, if anything? Or was Wall Street Mastermind like the first thing that you did in terms of, kind of acting on recruiting prep?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me was networking prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind. I was doing a lot of networking, albeit not very successfully, but I was still reaching out to a lot of people. Specifically, I was like targeting like I would target one firm in one division within the firm, and then just like hit that as hard as possible. But sometimes that can be counteractive and not very successful to put all your eggs in one basket as I remember you said to me. So I was doing that originally. The other things that I was kind of doing was I was searching for kind of smaller firms. I did an internship at a regional boutique, which was nice to do. It was a fully virtual internship too, which made it easier. I was able to balance that and class load in like 5 classes. So I got to work on two M&A deals there, a buy side and a sell side deal there. So
Wow.
that was obviously great to learn the whole process, and those are kind of things that set me up for success. I feel like in the longer term, even to take it like the hit of like not getting paid during the internship, you got to kind of eat that. But it's a part of the process if you want to stand out at all. And so that was kind of what I was doing. Other than that, not too much really. I wasn't. I wanted banking, but I didn't really think it was actually achievable for someone like me. I always thought that it would be a dream to work at a top firm like Piper Sandler and be able to work on these amazing deals that work alongside some of the premier companies in whatever industry I'd be covering. And but I didn't actually think it would be achievable. So the Wall Street Mastermind was kind of more of a wake up call for me.
That's awesome, man. I guess before we dive into that though, I'm curious, like, what made you feel like it wasn't really truly achievable at that
Yeah.
point?
I think the biggest thing will be two factors. One, my school, no one's ever heard of it. It's not a well known school at all. It's not a terrible school, but it just doesn't have a reputation for banking. The other thing was I have a lower GPA around the like 3.3, 3.4, and so that is obviously something that is not within the range at all what you'd expect for someone going for a summer internship. So combining those two factors together, I pretty much counted myself out. My technical knowledge there, I'd spent a lot of time doing technicals and behaviorals and prepping for that kind of stuff, but I thought like it wouldn't even be useful given if I couldn't even get in the interview.
Hmm, got it. Um, were you always trying to, like, as you say, you were networking a lot before,
Yeah.
were you always trying to break into banking in the US? Like, were you networking with US bankers or were you networking with firms in Canada?
Yeah, so the funny thing with that actually is is I started out networking with mostly in the States. I do hold U.S. citizenship as well. So I was born in Detroit, so I don't have to have any visa or anything like that in order to get across the States, which helped me a lot.
Yeah.
It's probably the greatest thing my parents have ever done for me was have me in the States. But
They're
that was
Canadian, but you were born in the States and then you guys moved back.
Yes, yes. They were
Gotcha.
working in the States at the time. They both work in medicine, so they were working at a hospital over there. And so they had me at the hospital they were working at. So I was given U.S. citizenship through birthright.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing for me was I never really pushed hard for U.S. internships. Even though as a U.S. citizen, I pretty much, like I said, for most banking positions, I kind of counted myself out. And so I didn't really think that it would be achievable to ever get into a firm like Piper Sandler and get into any of the top firms in the States. And so I mostly spent my time on like smaller firms in Canada, networking there, and trying to break in there. But after joining Wall Street Mastermind, it kind of changed my whole trajectory of everything.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Um, so I guess then that's a kind of natural segue into my next question, which is what made you want to join Wall Street Mastermind? Because obviously
Mhm.
you had it sounded like you had done a good amount of work prior to joining already, right?
Yeah,
And then also you didn't really feel like you were gonna get into these bigger banks anyway, given the school and the GPA and various factors. And so
yeah.
what made you want to join, I guess? And then also like were you joining Wall Street Mastermind with the intention or expectation of like, hey, if I join this, then maybe I can get into a bigger bank? Or was it still like, I'm not even trying to go for that, but I'm just going to join and just at least increase my chances for even the smaller banks that I'm targeting?
Yeah. So I think the why joining Wall Street Mastermind, I can separate that into 2 points. The first one would be I'd be really upset with myself if I really wanted banking and I didn't give 100% to it, and didn't put everything I had into it. Because if I looked back like 40 years later, and I wonder what I could have achieved if I put 100% into it, that'd be something that I'd always wonder, could I have actually done it? And so thankfully I did it, and that's why I'm where I am today. And so that was the big fear for me was not putting 100% in. The second point I would say would be I had really had no upperclassmen to like model myself afterwards, and I feel like that's one of the big things that comes with recruiting is when like application timeframes are going to open for which banks specifically, being able to talk to upperclassmen who have gone through the process successfully and learned how to network and stuff like that. And so, especially coming from the University of Windsor, I was kind of all by myself when it came to this whole recruiting for banking,
Right,
because there wasn't a lot of successful people that I could model strategies afterwards.
right,
And so Wall Street Mastermind kind of provided that a the learning for through like the modules and stuff like that, but B as well, it provided like a community via the Slack community where I can't tell you how many people I've privately messaged on Slack, and prior to like my interviews, I've had mock interviews with multiple people who are also in Wall Street Mastermind, just like kind of one on one, and actually another one who got into Piper Sandler. So we both got offers from Piper Sandler, and so the other ones who have like gone through the interview process and been successful at other firms, I was able to talk to them and kind of like bounce ideas off of them for frameworks of questions and stuff. So that's been the biggest thing for me, and the reason why I joined was to kind of get that community.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially going to a small school where you can count the number of people who got into banking on one hand. Uh,
Hmm.
I think being in that environment where you're, in the I call it like the information flow, right? It's like,
Yep.
oh, this application just opened, or like, oh, this job opportunity is available, or even like, we have the interview questions database. It's like these are the types of
Yeah.
questions that these firms typically ask. It's just like that. That's the kind of stuff that you would never get at a school like Windsor. And
Yeah.
some of these, quite frankly, and you said this, you made a comment earlier, which is like, you didn't think you would make it partially because of the competition that you knew you were up against. Like even after you went through the interview, you were still kind of not expecting to get it because
Yeah.
a lot of these other students that you were probably at the super day with, they come from these like super target schools that have a ton of resources and everybody there is trying to get into banking and they have all these clubs and whatnot and you
Hmm.
don't have that. And so you have to kind of figure out a way to, I mean, quite frankly, is it fair? No, like, but it just is what it is. And
Yeah.
no one's also going to feel sorry for you. And so all you can do is try to figure out a way to level the playing field, right? If
Yes.
not through your school, then through some other means, right? And so that's kind of what this is. Was it difficult to convince your parents about like letting you do this because you said they're both in medicine, guessing like they don't know anything about investment banking, recruiting, or
Yeah.
how hard it is, or why you even need something like this. Like they
Yeah.
probably, they didn't need anything like this to become doctors.
Yeah.
Like what was that kind of conversation like? Or were they just like super easy and supportive and they totally got it like right away? Like what was that like?
Yeah, so obviously it took a little bit of convincing for them because they don't understand anything about banking. Actually, my grandma asked me if I could help her open a line of credit after I get this internship. So they don't really understand what investment banking is and how it differs from retail banking at all. It was
Oh,
something that
sorry,
they.
just say yes or no.
I said sure, grandma, I could help you, but it won't be a Piper Sandler. But I yeah, so help like talking to them about kind of why I wanted to do it. They understood because they've seen me kind of go through this process for a year prior of like working hard for it and like constantly talking about it. Even in high school, I knew I wanted to do finance. I just didn't know like investment banking specifically. And so that was kind of like a conversation we had a couple times. At the end of the day, they're like, really, it's your call. You know if this is going to be the best decision for you because they've had pretty successful careers in medicine and they've had to give 100% to what they wanted to do, and so they know the value of hard work and being able to commit to something fully, and so that's kind of the rationale they understood, even if they didn't understand banking itself.
Yeah. So it sounds like because they've seen you go through this process last year already, perhaps maybe unsuccessfully, but
Yeah,
also just as importantly, they saw how hard you were trying.
yeah,
And so they knew that, I mean, if anything, it wasn't going to be for like lack of effort, basically. Uh,
yes,
and so basically, I think that makes a big difference, by the way, because we talk to so many students who want to work with us. Like they hear how the program works and they love everything they hear. Like, why would you not want something like this? Right.
yeah,
But then when they have to go and convince their parents, a lot of times like that's where they get stuck because they aren't able to convince their parents. But I also think that sometimes you aren't able to convince your parents because they don't sometimes it's because they don't trust the program. Like they just don't know the program. They don't know who we
yeah,
are. They're like, is this some scam that you found online or whatever, right?
yeah,
But sometimes it's like they don't trust you because
yeah,
because maybe you've been like screwing around your whole life and you haven't demonstrated to them that you actually can take something seriously or you actually are going to put in the work. And if they help you invest in something like this, you're not just going to like basically light their money on fire, like I think that matters a lot, right?
100%.
There's not a single parent out there who doesn't want their kid to do well.
Yeah,
But it's like if they feel like even if they were to support you, it's still not gonna amount to anything because of just the way you are or whatever, then it's not that they don't want to help you, but it's just, they don't want to waste their time and money, right? So
yeah,
I think the fact that you were able to show them that you were really serious about this, not through your words, but through your actions,
yeah.
I think that probably went a long way, right?
Yeah, and the other thing I kind of say to a situation like that is being kind of like transparent with your parents. Obviously, like to a certain degree, I don't tell my parents everything I do. I don't tell them when I'm going out or when I'm having fun with my friends or whatever. But
I
to
hope not.
yeah. They would definitely regret helping me out in as many ways if I told them all that stuff. But
Hopefully, mom and dad don't watch this interview, but
yeah, exactly. But they like the biggest thing is transparency in the sense of explaining to them how the industry works, and they've been through similar situations in their life where it's not necessarily like they've been through, okay, you don't go to a target school so it's harder for you to break into medicine or whatever it is, but they've been through situations where it's like it's hard to break into something just because of a certain background that you might have that doesn't necessarily affect your ability to get a job done. And so they can kind of resonate with that to a certain level, which I feel like helps a little bit.
For sure, for sure. Um, so okay, you get the support, you come into the program.
Yeah,
I said, I think, back then it was like, late November, right? It was like around Thanksgiving basically when you
yeah,
joined. And for the next, let's call it 3.5 months, until you got your offer basically, what what did you do? I guess like what did you spend all of your time on? Because we were joking, we're not even joking. I mean, it's serious. Like we were talking about it before we started recording this, but now all of a sudden you have so much time and you don't know what to do with all your free time.
yeah,
Why is that? For the last 3.5 months, you have probably no time, right? It's
yeah,
like, what were you doing? And we don't have to talk about every single thing because obviously that would be too much.
yeah.
But like, what were the um, most consequential or most impactful things from your perspective that you kind of worked on that, got you the results that you got?
Yeah, so I think the first thing was when joining the program, the modules were the most helpful. And one that actually really kind of stood out to me was the time blocking. I mean, like time blocking is something that I've done. And I have a lot of different calendars. I even track my like day down to like the half hour increments that I schedule it out. But really taking it kind of more serious and fitting everything in because I knew if I was like just sitting on my computer and I'm like, all right, now I'm going to do a little bit of networking, then I'm going to do a little bit of interview prep, and then I'm going to do a little bit of schoolwork. It's not going to all fit in. And it's kind of like the analogy of how you have the bucket, and then if you put in like the sand first and then the big rocks, it won't fit in. But if you put the big rocks in first and the sand on top, then it will fit in. So that's kind of something that really helped me was the time blocking and being better with my time management skills. And then kind of moving on to like the networking side of it was important too. Obviously, it was pretty late in the cycle. Like recruiting was about to start, and I remember seeing some of the elite boutiques post their jobs, and my heart kind of just sunk for a little bit because I'm like, I haven't done anything at all for American prep. And I just joined this program, and they're already posting jobs. And January 1st was when the big push of like most places opened up their applications.
Yeah.
So I was very worried about that. The second biggest thing was the resume template. I think the only reason my resume got pulled for as many firms that it did was just because of how I was able to structure it. Like the M&A deal experience, being able to structure it in its own section of breaking down the deals and then the main points on the deals and stuff like that, and having my resume constantly critiqued and improved was very important to even have like any firm take me seriously versus the resume that I was using prior to it. And then like the action words and all that kind of stuff that is kind of shown on the templates was very important.
Yeah.
And then as well as the networking, again, that's obviously if you want to break into banking, you have to network. There's pretty much no other way to do it. Even if you come from a top school, you still have to network because of the amount of kids from your school alone that you're competing with. I remember talking to someone from UPenn who was saying even people who aren't in the business program, they're still trying to break into banking, and so it's obviously you have to network a lot. And then other than that, I think it was just like learning the technical knowledge and prepping, just prepping over and over and over again was the biggest thing. Understanding the core concepts. Like I've used a lot of different banking preps in my life through things through I got through school and stuff like that. A lot of different sites where you can watch and build a DCF or like a comps model or stuff like that. And those are great for like practical use and probably what I'll start using more once I start preparing for the job to kind of hit the ground running at Piper Sandler as much as possible. But when it comes to the interview, I think conceptually understanding the questions are more important because they're not going to throw out questions that are exactly from the 400 guide. They're going to give little variations on the question. So if you can understand how the three statements change, or DCF, like enterprise value versus equity value, and the example that you gave, the $200 lawsuit, cash goes out by $200. Naturally, someone would just think, okay, decrease enterprise value by $200, but why it's actually stagnant. Understanding these conceptual questions was important for all of the interviews, because I was able to sit there and actually think through the frameworks that you had given out, and understand how to answer the questions properly.
Yeah. That's great, man. I mean, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah,
I think the first thing you said about time blocking and that rock and sand analogy, that was such a good analogy. And I almost forgot because I've obviously watched training before, but
yeah,
I almost forgot about it myself. But I remember when I first heard about it, that was also kind of like an aha moment for me, right? Because um, it's not just about utilizing your time, but like prioritizing the biggest, most time consuming, and most important things first.
yeah,
So like having enough time to do like deep work, uninterrupted work, uh,
yeah,
before you fill in the cracks with like the smaller, less important things. A lot of times it's the other way around, where like the smaller, less important things feel like it's more urgent or whatever, and then you end up punting on the bigger things, and you never end up doing those big things, right?
yeah.
And I honestly think like we might be the only program that actually even talks about this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Because most banking prep resources that you use don't even, this is not like the sexy stuff, you know?
Yeah,
Not like
yeah,
build an LBO model or whatever. But like,
yeah,
but in reality, if you actually think about what recruiting is and what it takes to be successful in investment banking recruiting, um, it's not rocket science.
yeah,
Like none of the individually, none of the things that you have to do or learn to do is like I don't say it's easy, but like you don't have to be a genius, right? It's not like quantum physics or something, right? But it's the fact that you have to do all of these things simultaneously, right? You have to try to like keep your grades up in school, or at least like not let it drop any further, right? You have to do part-time internships like you were interning at a regional boutique bank. You had to like ideally, take on leadership positions or have some sort of extracurricular activity on campus. You have to network with a bunch of bankers, which you already mentioned. You have to do the interview prep, behaviorals, technicals, everything, right? Like to have to do all of that simultaneously, and that's before we even talk about just being a normal college student and having a social life and all that other stuff, right?
hmm,
Um, that's where I see most people fail because
yeah,
it's not that they if I gave you all the time in the world and I said there was no deadline for when you have to do this by, you can take as long as you want to just like figure it out and get it done. Like I'm pretty sure every single person will be able to eventually figure it out.
yeah,
Right? The challenge is like the recruiting timeline starts so early now, just like you said earlier. It's like even by the time you join Wall Street Mastermind in like late February, sorry, no, late November of sophomore year, like applications are already open and you are already feeling like you're behind. It's like that's crazy, right? And
yeah,
so um most people struggle where they don't have enough time or they don't know how to manage their time the right way. And so they start cutting corners in some of these things like I'm just gonna network a little bit less because I don't have time. Or oh, like maybe I'm not gonna do this internship, or maybe like I won't study as much for the interview. Like something has to give.
yeah,
And I always tell people like you're only gonna go as far as your weakest link allows you to go because maybe you're really well prepped for the interview, but your resume is lacking. So you can't even get the interview in the first place. Or maybe you're really well prepped for the interview, but you don't do enough networking, so you can't get the interview in the first place. Or maybe it's the other way around. Like you're getting interviews, but like you didn't do enough prep on the interview, so you're not gonna pass the interview anyway. So it's like none of these things are optional or nice to haves, right? Like they're
yeah,
all mandatory. And so you have to do all of them well in a very limited amount of time. And so like that's one of the first things we talk about. Because also we find that some college students are very good at managing their time already. A lot of college students are terrible at
yeah,
it. And so if we
yeah,
don't fix that first, it's almost like nothing else is really gonna matter, right? So I think that's a really good call out because most people don't even think about that. Um, on the networking side, I'm curious to hear about this part specifically because you coming from a school like Windsor, obviously there's barely anyone from your school that's even working on Wall Street that you can network with. And most of the
Yeah,
people network, they're just like, oh, let me reach out to the alumni from my school, right?
yeah.
Like, I'm sure you try to do that too, and then you ran out of people after like one day, right? So, what was that process like for you, and how did you go about it? And obviously, you got an offer, and
Yeah,
also sounds like from what you were saying earlier, you had your resume pulled in like not just Piper, but multiple places.
yeah.
So, what do you think enables you to have that type of success on the networking front?
Yeah, so I'll preface it by saying, like obviously I got the Piper Sandler offer, and that one is the probably the one that's the most valuable to me. But I did get the opportunity to do multiple super days with multiple firms. Got some like elite boutique interviews and different stuff like that. So I got interviews with a good amount of firms. And so the biggest thing when it came to networking was, like you said, I run out of like Windsor contacts within the first day or the first 5 emails. So that one took like 5 minutes to send out all those emails. But when it came to other people, I looked for similarities. In some of them, I'd like really stretch for similarities. Like it would be like, okay, you played D1 hockey. I played hockey all the time growing up. Let's connect. Like sometimes I'd really stretch for them, but like anything that I could find in common with another person. There's
Did that
one.
work?
Sorry.
Did that work?
Yes, yeah. There's one time actually. There was a guy who used to play Major League Baseball for my favorite team. So and then he worked at a top middle market. So I reached out saying, hey, this is my favorite team, like in baseball, and so let's have a coffee chat. And so that ended up working out. But there's like I had this. I used the Wall Street Mastermind tracker for anything that I have in contact with them, like the warm connections versus the cold connections, and just the biggest thing is that I found was like obviously like quantity is important. You got to send out a lot of emails because if you connect with just one MD, who knows how far they'll be able to take you in the process. But if you connect with like 50 MDs, you're much more likely to get an offer. But on top of that, you want to connect with 50 MDs that will actually respond back to you. And so playing up those anything you have in common. I did an internship at a big five in Canada in Toronto in their private wealth sector. So that also has a reach into the states as well. They have many offices in the states. And so being able to reach out to those firms that have like Chicago, New York, Seattle offices, and say, hey, I'm a former BMO intern. I'd love to talk to you. I got a couple coffee chats just because of that. And so anything that you could kind of do to like play that you have a commonality with the person is probably the most success that I had.
Yeah. So you basically, and how did you find these commonalities? You would like just go on LinkedIn and you would, I'm guessing, look through every single banker's profile manually one at a time to see if you can spot anything that you can leverage. Is that kind of just what you did?
That's how I did it for the most part, until I got a little bit more lazy and I just started searching for Michigan, and I just basically said, "Hey, I'm from Michigan. I was born in Detroit. Let's connect, and you're from Michigan as well." So that one I did a little bit more. That was probably easier to do because you can just search off where they went to school or where they went to high school or something like that. But for the most part, that's what I did. Go through every contact manually, and basically figure out if we have any commonalities or not.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's like, finding the right people to reach out to. And then I guess once you did get on a call with them though, because like reaching out to them is only half the battle, right?
Yeah,
So once you got on a call with them, like how do you convince people to take a chance on a kid like you who goes to a school they've probably never heard of and
yeah.
has a 3.3, 3.4 GPA, like you said? Um, like what were those conversations like, I guess?
Yeah, so it's a fine line. That was like, I mean, you touched on this in the networking modules, but it's a fine line between not looking stupid and looking smart, but also not trying to go overboard and ask some crazy question about like about something in the industry that they have seen and like look like a tryhard essentially, and just kind of ruin the whole conversation. So you kind of have to walk that fine line. And so you ask thoughtful questions that might actually be applicable to them. Like if they worked for two different firms, one was a bulge bracket, one's a middle market, you ask them about some differences that they might see in the firm and go more into specifics there. And the other thing that was kind of hit on in the networking modules that I tried to abide by was don't ask a question that you can find the answer to online. And if I can just search up what's the difference between a bulge bracket firm and a middle market firm, I'm not going to hop on a networking call and say, hey, what's the difference between your firm and JP Morgan? It's a stupid question, and you're gonna look stupid for asking it. But I think the biggest thing was kind of finding that fine line, and people like to talk about themselves, right? And so ask good, thoughtful follow-up questions. It's not necessarily the first question that comes to your mind when they blurt something out. Actually listen and come up with a good follow-up question afterwards that makes them think a little bit and makes them talk about themselves is important. And the other thing I found this was not necessarily spending the whole conversation talking about work. They work obviously 80 to 100 hours a week. They don't want to spend another 30 minutes of their time necessarily talking about deals and talking about some crazy stuff like that. Spend like 5 to 10 minutes having a normal human being conversation. Ask them about their family. Ask them about what they like to do for fun. There's one guy who made time for me while he was on a ski trip. So we just spent 15 minutes talking about skiing, and so it was a pretty important conversation because I was just able to talk about something that he enjoyed, and so it was definitely much more fruitful than any conversation where I just strictly talk about banking.
Yeah, for sure. That's so many good pieces of advice there, but I think, and a lot of these actually kind of, tie into each other, right? So for example, when we say don't ask a question that you can just find the answer to online, and then we also said people like to talk about themselves. A
Hmm.
lot of times if you're asking them questions that's actually about them, by definition, it's not going to be something you can find online because you can't
Exactly.
much, because all you can find is like their LinkedIn profile and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And those also tend to be the best types of questions because if you think about it, like your goal in, I mean, your goal in networking is to get the referral. Obviously, yes, you know that,
Hmm.
everyone knows that. It's the elephant
Yeah.
in the room. But like, you can't just come across like super transactional about it, or
Yeah.
like feeling like no one likes feeling like they're being used, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to, the most important thing is that you have to get them to like you as a person first. If they
Yeah.
like you as a person, then they might actually want to help you. If they don't like you as a person, then I can guarantee they're not going to help you because they don't have to,
Yeah.
right? And so the easiest way to get someone to actually like you is to be genuinely interested about who they are as a person,
Hmm.
and that requires you to ask like good, thoughtful questions about them and not just like surface level questions, but once they respond to whatever questions you ask, then also asking follow-up questions and like digging deeper and really trying to understand who they are. And like this guy with the skiing example, he loves skiing. And so if you could spend 15 minutes talking about skiing, which is something that he loves, like that's gonna make him feel like it was an enjoyable conversation,
Yeah.
right? Which is gonna make it more likely that he likes you. So it's like, I mean, when you talk about it this way, it all sounds so simple. And so it's like common sense almost. But yet, like a lot of people don't do it,
Yeah.
or like actually the way a lot of people do these calls is they go in with like a list of 10 questions that they've already prepared ahead of time, which are also like very boring questions that because you're asking the same questions to every single banker. So
Yeah.
there's no way that's personalized to who they are as a person. And they
Yeah.
can tell these are cookie cutter answers because they've answered these questions hundreds of times. And it just doesn't make them feel like you're actually interested in who they are. Right.
Yeah. 100%.
So that's like 100% not going to work. Yet that is how most people do it. So I don't know why people continue to do it that way, but that's kind of part of what we try to tell people to not do. So,
Yeah. Exactly.
uh,
I
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
I even ditched like coming up with a huge list of questions beforehand because on it, quite honestly, too, like you want to get something out of a networking call. Maybe it's some advice. Obviously, it's the referrals, the biggest thing, but you also want to have somewhat of a decent time on a networking call because you're doing so many of them. And when I was asking the same questions over and over again, it became very boring because pretty much everyone has the same answer. So it wasn't anything special. So I started kind of like ditching the list of 10 questions that I had for someone, or a list of like 15 questions, and I started making like just going and seeing how the conversation kind of flows, and
Yeah.
figuring out if I can fit those questions in, then I will. But at the end of the day, if I can't, then it's probably a better conversation if I can't fit those questions in.
Yeah, exactly. And like when you do it that way, every conversation is different,
Yeah,
right? And it's actually a lot more, I mean, it requires you to like think on your feet a bit more.
yeah,
But then at the same time, if you're just like, if you get yourself into the mindset of being genuinely interested in the other person, then it actually is not that hard because no matter what they say, you're going to be curious to want to know more. Oh,
hmm.
like, why did you think that? Or like, why did you make that decision? Or how did you go about doing that? Right? Or, like just there are only so many things you could ask, like what, why, who, when,
Yeah,
how, right? And then like, and then like usually the why and the how questions are probably best because they're more open-ended and it gets people talking more. And the more you get the other person talking, the more opportunity there is for you to like latch onto something and ask another follow-up questions off of that, right? And
yeah,
and then like once you're doing that, then the conversation starts to flow a lot more versus going off of, a predetermined list of 10 questions that are all unrelated to each other and the conversation is super choppy and there's no flow whatsoever. Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that's great advice. I guess on the technical side of things, right? Because you mentioned obviously you had used a ton of other resources before. There's different sites, like some, teach you how to build models, which I think you brought up a really good point, which is I think it's a different thing to learn what it takes to get the job versus learning what it takes to do the job.
Hmm.
And I know that's like seems counterintuitive because I think a lot of people mix the two together or think it's one and the same. And I don't even blame people for this. I think quite literally I kind of blame like the investment banking recruiting prep industry as a whole because they kind of mislead people with their marketing by saying like, "Oh, you want to get this job? Like, just learn how to build a model. Then like it's
Yeah,
help you get a job." And like it sounds so logical on the surface, and so people are just like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. Let me go and like learn how to build a OBO model." And like in reality, you have multiple interviews with bulge bracket, elite boutique, middle market banks, whatnot, like basically all these top 50 banks. How many of these firms actually ask you to do a modeling test?
yes, exactly.
I mean, no, like what's the number? I know
Oh,
the answer.
oh, you're genuinely asking me.
Yeah.
Oh, no, none. I never got a
Yeah.
modeling test.
Yeah, like zero. Like none
Yeah,
of them will ever ask you to do that in the interview process because that is not what they're testing for.
yeah,
Right. So like if you go through this long ass course on how to build a LBO model, and it's like some of these courses are like 100 hours long or whatever.
yeah,
And yeah, okay, you learn how to link up this cell to this cell and use this formula, and then you do this. Like that is a different muscle, and it's not the muscle that you're gonna need to exercise to do well in like when it comes game time. Like
yes,
and
yes,
and so that's why I always tell people like learn the skills you need to get the job first, which is you're going to be asked questions verbally. You're going to have to explain different concepts to your interviewer. And I was talking about like the best test for whether you're ready to do that or not is like, can you teach these concepts to like a total finance newbie or beginner who knows
yeah,
nothing about like, can you explain what a DCF is to someone who knows nothing about DCFs? In like layman terms, right? Because if you can, then that's literally what you're going to be asked to do in these interviews. And most people cannot do that, or they just memorize 400 answers to the 400 questions. And then you're not going to get asked those exact same questions, just like you said earlier.
hmm. Yeah. No, technical interviews are they're two parts. I would say they're a box check. One a great piece of advice I got when I was networking was a technical interview won't get you the job, but it'll lose you the job.
Yeah.
And so that they're kind of like a box check in that sense, but they're also in the other sense they're also like a competency and hard work test. How much effort did you actually put into recruiting? Do you understand this, or did you just spend the night before the interview memorizing as many questions from the 400 guide as you could, and went in there and hoped they would pull questions directly from the ones that you memorized? Like that's the biggest thing. And so if you can walk through how like weighted average cost of capital, for example, how it works, or walk through a DCF and how it works. When it comes time for them to train you on how to build the DCF, if you already know kind of conceptually how it works, it becomes that much easier. Rather than, okay, I can build a DCF on Excel if you give me these inputs, but if I don't have these inputs, I don't know what to do. So if you know how they all affect each other, then if you remove like X from the equation, you know how to rearrange that formula and figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. It's like not putting the cart before the horse, basically, right? Like
Yes.
learn how to verbalize and explain these things to another person first. That's what you're gonna need to get the job. And then once you get it, you still have months before you actually start the job. And that would be a very good time to go and actually learn how to do these things, whether it's in like a modeling format or in a
Yeah.
PowerPoint format, because those are the things that you're actually gonna need to do on the job, right? So
Exactly.
many people that spend so much time learning this stuff and they can't even get the job. And then like after they don't get the job, they'll never get the opportunity to actually use those skills, right? Which is just kind of crazy to me. So so that's um that's all really, really, really I think helpful insights for people. I guess the last question that I have for you, because I know we're almost out of time here, and I think you've already given a lot of advice to be honest, but now that you're on the other side and you successfully finish this process, um, what advice do you have for people who either are still currently recruiting or maybe they're about to start going through recruiting?
Yeah.
It's maybe perhaps like, especially if it's someone like you who comes from a very small non-target school, maybe they have a lower GPA, like they're just like total underdogs that most people will count out. Was there anything that you learned along the way, whether it's like someone else told you this or you figured it out on your own from your experience, that just like really helped you get to where you are today? Like anything like that that you can pass on to other people?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice, I'll actually break it into two separate pieces. The first one is like you can always be doing more, right? And this is touched on a lot and throughout different modules is you can always be doing more. And you're constantly running a race against other people that you don't know how fast they're running or how far they are. And so why would you ever assume where like someone else is in the race? The biggest life lesson in that term I got when I was playing hockey was I was in a tournament one time, and we needed another team to lose in order for us to get into the finals. Why do I ever want to be in a position where I need someone else to do poorly and I'm reliant on someone else in order for me to get to the place that I want to be? It should be 100% on you. And so I think that's the biggest thing is like just when you have extra time, you just pour everything you can into recruiting and working hard, and doing that 100%. I think the other biggest piece of advice is something that you touched on earlier. It's not rocket science. It's not super difficult to understand how you need to break in. You just need to do what you're expected to do. And just follow the steps is pretty much what it is. Like you'll have to improvise, you'll have to think on your feet, of course, whether it comes to finding contacts for networking or how to explain your story a little bit better and make you stand out from target school students. But at the same time, it's really just about putting in the work, and anyone can achieve it, and anyone can get to the position that I got to. It's really just give 100% and just follow the simple steps of networking, learning your technicals, behaviorals, and then show up when it's an interview time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like just, on that last point that you made there, the key though also is you have to figure out a way to really learn what the best practices are.
Yeah,
When you're going out and trying to execute on these things, you're actually doing the right things, right? Because
yeah,
I find that a lot of people, they understand at a very high level, like 30,000 foot view, kind of vague, like, yeah, yeah, I need a network. I know I need a network. And it's like they're out there, they're networking, but they're not getting results from it because they're not going about it the right way.
100%. Yes.
Like they're not reaching out to the right people, or even when they get on calls, like we talked about earlier, like they're not asking the right types of questions, right? Or
Yeah.
just following like a script of, canned questions that they prepared beforehand. There's always, just like anything else, there's do's and don'ts. And you kind of have to like first figure out what those things are before um before you go out and try to execute, because otherwise for most people you're probably recruiting for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Like this is the first time you're doing it, and so it shouldn't be a surprise if there are lots of things that you just don't quite know how to do, at least
Yeah.
don't quite know what the best practices are, right? Like you might have some idea of how it should be done, um but a lot of times like that's where like silly little mistakes get made, not because
Yeah.
or whatever, but it's just like lack of experience, and then so like you can either figure it out through a ton of trial and error, or you can just benefit from all the mistakes that other people have already made before you.
Yeah.
And the benefit of like us having worked with at this point over 1,800 students is we've seen over and over and over again what works and what doesn't work, right? Like this is what it takes to be successful. Don't do this.
Hmm.
If you have someone who, even if you're just going, if you think about it, like if there's two alternatives here. One is you're just going through it for the first time ever, and no one tells you anything. The second alternative is you're going through it for the first time ever, but you get instructions on like what 1,800 other people have done and what's worked and what hasn't worked, so that you know exactly what to do and not do. Like, which one do you think is going to make you more successful? It's just
Yeah.
like the first time you're trying to summit Mount Everest, you want to go up on your own, or do you want to hire a Sherpa who's been
Yeah.
many, many times, right? You're still gonna have to climb the mountain yourself. Still gonna be a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like give you a piggyback ride up the mountain or anything, like we can do that. But I can tell you, watch your step over here. You're gonna fall off a cliff, or like don't go over there. It's dangerous,
Yeah.
right? And that can make a huge difference. Like both in terms of like whether you even make it up to the mountaintop at all, or like, and if you do, like how quickly it takes you, or how fast you can get up there. Because also we know with recruiting is typically the sooner you can get the offer, or the earlier on the recruiting time you get the offer, typically the better the offer is going to be.
Hmm.
Like all the
Yeah.
best banks recruit the earliest, and then they fill up first. Like elite boutiques finish recruiting first, and then it's bulge bracket and middle market banks. And then like if you're still recruiting after that, when all those banks are done, you have to resort to like regional boutique banks, and like you just keep going further and further downstream.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why like speed also matters a lot as well. Right.
Yeah, that I think that's the biggest value add that I found specifically within Wall Street Mastermind was just being able to talk to so many people. Even like everyone that I talked to and privately messaged within Slack was always open to talk to me. The amount of like times I've hopped on phone calls with people who are already going through the process, or people who had been successful through the process, and just learned so much from that was very important. And it was quite honestly the probably the most defining factor of why I was able to get an offer or be successful at all was just because of the community that you have.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome, man. So, I mean, look, guys, for those of you who are still with us, if any of this resonates with you, maybe you also come from kind of a background that makes you a total underdog in banking recruiting. Maybe you come from a school that nobody has ever heard of. Maybe you come from, come with a GPA that is, lower than what a lot of candidates will have in this process. And you know how that kind of handicaps you, but at the same time, you maybe have some limiting beliefs around what you can or can't accomplish, but you're also still wanting to try. Like you don't want to just like completely give up, because just like Jacob, it's like he maybe didn't really think that this was achievable, but he still gave it everything he got. He still put in 100% because of what he said at the beginning, which is he would really be mad at himself 40 years from now. And I thought that was such like a wise and mature perspective, by the way. It's like most people just don't think that way, right? But it's like when I'm 60 years old and I'm looking back and reflecting on my career, if it didn't end up where I wanted it to, or if it didn't like play out the way I had hoped, am I going to have any regrets? You know, because a lot of people it's like woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? Like, oh, I wish I did this, or oh, I could have tried a little bit harder, or oh, I could have gotten more help. And it's like by then it's too late. Like you can't, there's no time machine. You can't go back in time and like redo it, right? Versus if you know you gave everything you got, like even if you came into Wall Street Mastermind and like you weren't 100% sure that this was gonna work, but I think at least like if it didn't work, you knew that you gave it everything you got and you did
Mhm.
everything you could and it still didn't work. That means like oh, it just wasn't meant to be. But like you're not gonna regret that, right? And
Yeah,
that's the biggest thing is like when people have regret, and I do know friends my age who have regrets, and it's just this feeling that's constantly eating away at you from the inside and never goes away.
yeah,
That is a terrible thing.
it's horrible.
So that's what you really want to avoid. So, anyway, if that sounds like you and you get what we're talking about, and you want to maximize your chances, you want every competitive advantage you could possibly get, you want to level the playing field with the type of students you're competing with who maybe do go to, a more advantageous school and who do have more resources than you do, then I want to encourage you to reach out and just schedule a call with our team. That's all it is for the first step. It's like we don't even know if we can help you, but if you just at least have a chat with us, right? We'll learn more about your situation. We'll ask you about your profile, where you at in the recruiting timeline, what are all the things you've tried so far on your own, what's working, what's not working, what kind of banks are you aiming for, and based on everything you tell us, because everyone's in a different situation, but based on what you tell us, we'll try do our best to like map out what we think the most logical game plan is for someone like you, right? And then you can decide if the game plan makes sense and you want us to help you with it, then great. We can talk about what that might look like. If you're like, this game plan makes sense, but I want to try to do it on my own, great. You can go and do it on your own, right? Or if you're like, this game plan makes no sense and I don't want to do this at all, then you shouldn't do this, right? But like either way, again, because we've done this so many times, chances are we're going to be able to at least give you one or two things that you can take away with you and just even just implement on your own, and it's going to make a pretty significant difference on your outcome, right? Even some of the things that we talked about on this call today. Hopefully, you guys, found it to be useful, and you can take that with you and implement on your own, regardless of whether you actually talk to us or not. So it's kind of like that, except we'll spend an entire hour talking about just you, right? So if you guys want to do that, I would encourage you to go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to helping you out. All right. So with that said, Jacob, I want to thank you again for taking the time to be here with us today. I think, dude, what you've accomplished is something that you should be extremely proud of because, I mean, I don't know how many years it's been since someone from your school got into, a firm like Piper Sandler. So from what you're saying, it sounds like it's been a while. And to be able to do that with, the school you come from and even like the GPA that you have, I think it's a testament to just one, your hard work, but two, you having the belief in yourself to bet on yourself. Because I think a lot of people in your position would not have made that bet because they're like, oh, this is like probably going to be a waste of money or a waste of time or this is not going to work. It's like, but again, I already said this earlier. I think the way you thought about it is just very wise. It's like you got to go all out for something this important, so that you can leave it all out there and not have regrets. And that's what you did. And maybe it's because you were an athlete, like how athletes say a lot of times, like, hey, I left it all out there, and even if I lose, like whatever, like I try my best, right? And I think that is the type of mindset that has enabled you to have the success that you have today and probably will enable you to continue to have the type of success that you've had. So yeah, man, I'm super happy for you, super proud of you, and look forward to seeing what you accomplish going forward at Piper and really beyond that too. So
Yeah, thank you for having me today, and thank you for this program. It was definitely probably the main reason why I was able to accomplish it to this point. So thank you again.
I appreciate you saying that. And as I tell everyone, like you guys deserve most of the credit because um, again, not to continue with the sports analogy, but we're the coach, you're the athlete. We can coach you up. We can practice with you, we'll watch game film with you, we can run the drills with you. But if you don't show up to practice, or if you go out, when it's game time and you don't execute on the game plan that we drew up for you, or you don't, score when you when you're on the ice, like nothing I say or we say as the coach is really going to matter, right? Of course, like we have a hand in setting you up for the success, but if you don't do the work, like none of it matters. So it's a testament again to your hard work, and yeah, man, you deserve all the credit. So
Thank
anyway,
you.
thank you guys for listening to this episode. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And until next time, all right, cheers.